All right, well, we're at 10 o'clock, so why don't we get started because we only have so much time. I'm Jane Hampton with the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center, and I'd like to welcome Bryan. Bryan, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Jane. Thank you. First of all, thanks for the invite, and happy to be here on the call / recording today with you all. I work for the State Department of Education as the Special Education Division Director, and I've been with the State Department a little over 3 years at this point. Prior to, I had experience working as a paraprofessional, special education teacher, a special education administrator, and assistant superintendent in my previous roles, and that's both in Massachusetts and Connecticut. And I'm happy to be here today to answer questions that you might have and just to provide a little update from the Bureau as far as activities supporting the school closures due to COVID-19.
Great, thanks. And what we want to talk about today, for those of you guys who are on the call, are what some of our families are calling us about, some of the things that they're experiencing. Bryan's going to share some of the things that the Bureau is doing, some guidance that they put out, but what we're going to talk about today are the differences. We have some families saying that they're getting too much and they don't know what to do with all the educational opportunities, might not be appropriate for their child, and then we have families saying we're not getting anything or we're not getting enough. So we're going to try to deal with a few family circumstances to help give some families some ideas of where to move forward. But Bryan, did you want to share some of the things you guys are doing to inform families in districts of what's going on?
Yeah, and just first of all, I really have to thank our leadership team at the State Department of Education. Just trying to navigate this unprecedented pandemic and health crisis is challenging, but the leadership team at the State Department of Education, under the leadership of Dr. Cardona, our commissioner, and Deputy Commissioners Desi Nesmith and Charlene Russell Tucker, have been so supportive, and to be involved in the planning and around supports and resources for our educators and parents and families just has been a nice experience and makes our job within the Special Education Bureau that much easier when we have the support from the commissioner and from the leadership and the team. So I just wanted to thank our leadership team. And as you know, we have several departments at the State Department, and it's really been a collective effort and a collaborative effort to be able to provide information and as I mentioned earlier, resources and supports. I am thankful to be part of a professional organization as well called NASD, which is the National Association of State Directors of Education. So I am on biweekly calls with other state departments to collaborate and understand what's happening in other states for alignment. The Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services at the federal government has provided us some guidance up to this point, which has been extremely helpful. And they do have some guidance that is on the way in the form of topic briefs that we are anxiously anticipating as we move forward with longer delays than originally anticipated. We've had many structures of communication in place to be able to address these issues. I look forward to today. Jane, as always, collaborating with CPAC is an extremely beneficial relationship to be able to understand the perspective from the parents and the calls that you receive on a day-to-day basis. So we're happy to continue these types of sessions where we have ongoing questions and answers and recorded webinars for families. We have a professional and a parent series of supports that are available on our website. We had the first round that ended 2 weeks ago, and we have the next round of recorded webinars. And on deck for us, so to speak, is supports for parents that are supporting high needs students within their homes and that have intensive special needs and require really creative approaches to be able to support their needs during school closures. And we also have an updated webinar on children in the birth to 3 process, transitioning from birth to 3 to public schools during this time. And there is an executive order that is en route that hasn't been disseminated yet, but we do have guidance and training to follow up once that does happen. We're anticipating that to be done in the near future. We also have guidance around continued educational opportunities. As you mentioned, Jane, we're hearing from parents all along the spectrum as far as the communication and what's being provided to students during this time. We have guidance related to students that are in out-of-district placements at this time, and that population of students in the approved private special education programs responsibilities to provide continued educational opportunities. So we've been collaborating with our partners from local school districts as well as our out-of-school districts. And then our most recent guidance that has come out is around the dispute resolution process. So our due process team and systems are up and running. There are some logistical delays to some of the processes, but we are working to provide information and resources to both parents and districts to be able to resolve disputes at this time, including a system of virtual mediation that is just about on the cusp of being implemented so that districts and parents can continue to seek resolution for any disagreements that they have. So I think I'll pause at that point here, Jane, and just to say, I hope everyone that's listening is doing well under the circumstances. Thank you for all that you're doing, reaching out and getting information and doing the best that you can to support students in your home at this time, and ready and happy to have a Q&A and answer any questions that and provide any information that I can at this time.
Sorry, I got muted for a reason. The first thing I wanted to say, Bryan, is you listed a lot of resources. So
Yes.
For people who might be interested in something on grading or any of the resources Bryan mentioned, birth to 3 transition, there's a pile of them. The special needs webinar is not out yet, though. Is that correct? The one with resources for the high needs students?
That's being recorded today and
Okay.
will be posted shortly thereafter. So yeah, there is on our website, and I'm not sure the best way to do this, Jane. Perhaps what I can do is provide a link where those resources can be found that we could share with the audience to be posted.
Well, that's what I was going to say is I think probably all of them are on our Facebook page, but if people are looking for something that they can't find that they heard about, just give us a call and we'll help you find it. Because I know we're trying to post all the guidance and all the webinars that the state is putting out.
And we realize there's so much out there, so we've tried to really redesign our website so that it's easy to navigate and easy to find. So I can provide those links to post, and they can contact our office as well if they're looking for a specific resource.
Okay, great. What I'd like to do today, because we do a lot of people, which is very exciting, and I say hi to Amy and hi Claudia, because I see you guys there. Let's start with a few questions Bryan and I prepared about general situations that families are dealing with that we're hearing, and then afterwards, if there's more specific questions, we might open the mic. But these are kind of general things that might give people a lot of guidance.
Sounds good.
So the first question is really a little bit different than the rest, which is about ESY. We are getting parents calling and asking us, what can we expect about ESY coming up? And what would your answer be for that?
Yeah, extended school year services. I know that's a topic that we've been thinking about and planning for since the school closures initially happened, in looking out. When the delays went beyond the weekend or 1 or 2 days or the 2 weeks, we knew the impact was going to be longer. Extended school year services is one of those areas where we know that there's many questions around that, and there's a lot of unknowns. What I can share with Jane, with everyone on the call today, is that OSERS has been pretty clear in their guidance around extended school year services up to this point in time, saying that the criteria for extended school year hasn't changed. So Connecticut has criteria for students who qualify for extended school year services, and that remains. The responsibility to provide extended school year services for FAPE remains. So what they have said is that ESY should not be confused with compensatory education or makeup services because of the impact on the COVID-19 school closures. So in other words, the ESY process shouldn't be utilized to determine whether and to what extent students have been impacted in meeting their IEP needs. So ESY, what ESY will look like now is, that's the big question mark. As we all know, the closures right now continue through May 20th. There is sort of this preparation for closures beyond that point, given the national health trends. I shouldn't say national, given the trends in the stage of the pandemic in Connecticut right now, and what we're experiencing with hospitalizations and so forth and social distancing. But ESY would need to be provided for students who qualify remotely, in other words, to the greatest extent that they could be over the summer months, if face-to-face programming was not available. So LEAs would have that responsibility. Students that are in out-of-district placements that require extended school year services should continue to receive those services. And what those services look like is different.
So kids that are traditionally eligible, obviously the team usually redetermines that eligibility, but
That's
what
right.
you're saying is that's not based on current performance and any regression that might have happened right now. That would be based on what they knew about the child before they left?
Again, the ESY process shouldn't be used to determine the impact of the COVID-19. So, right, so there is a smaller population that qualifies for extended school year services. Now, Jane, I just want to follow up with that point by saying the summer provides an opportunity. The commissioner has a team working on, and the governor have teams working on re-entry into schools for students, because we know that's going to take some planning and some transition time. So there are experts and teams working on that from all walks of life, including education. And the summer, perhaps, again, depending on where we are with social distancing, provides an opportunity for all students to be able to address needs that have arisen based on school closures. That can happen concurrently with the ESY services, if that makes sense. They're two different and distinct things, but one doesn't mean the other can't happen. So I know that the commissioner is working on that with input from the Special Education Bureau, and we're looking at opportunities to be able to mitigate the impact that students are feeling, and not feeling, students are experiencing.
So the bottom line is, for ESY unto itself, is that if the child is eligible under the traditional eligibility criteria, they should still be expecting something for ESY. What that looks like at this point, we don't know what that is, but the family and the district should be having that conversation.
That's right.
At some point. So let's talk about the family who finds the work they are getting for their child overwhelming, and their child is unable to participate because of many reasons. It may be the parents are working during the time that they're supposed to be online. It may be the child's disability gets in the way. Some families just want to throw their hands up and say, I can't do this. I just can't do this. It's too much. There's too many pressures. And there are families who are truly just disconnecting and walking away. What is your concern for them when school returns?
Yeah, I really just want to say that, we understand what parents are experiencing right now. And there are several issues that are impacting families' ability and students' ability to receive education. We know that when school is in session and when the pandemic is not upon us, that's a completely different situation than what we're in now. So, parents understand their family, they understand their situations in the house. And like every educator that has earned their salt believes, the parent is the number one educator for their student. They know their students best. So really, if parents are feeling overwhelmed or feeling that they aren't able, or that their students aren't able to benefit from what is being provided, communication is really the key at that point. So it would be communicating with your school, your teachers, your child's case manager for their IEP, with the administrators from the school building or the special education directors, to ensure that they understand the current situation that's in the home. But one, for to be able to document sort of the student's progress as it relates to the IEP, but moreover, just to develop positive relationships and caring and relationships between schools and families. The school could provide some resources maybe that the parent was not aware of around meeting their basic needs at this time. Working with other agencies to be able to provide supports and services in the home is a possibility, but it is very challenging, and I think we hope that educators understand the variability right now in homes, whether or not parents are working, supporting multiple children in the home, supporting multiple plans in the home, maybe not working, or trying to meet their basic needs of food and survival and paying the bills at this time. So yeah, it's it's a time that really requires understanding and sensitivity and a practical approach to the educational process.
What I'm concerned about myself is that if a family is overwhelmed right now, and as you said, it's very understandable, there's all different kinds of circumstances people are living in, but if the school understands that the family has disconnected for this period of time, and now we go back to school in, October 1st, I'll make up a date, that child is most likely going to show some regression. And I am wondering how a district is going to receive a child that the family has walked away from whatever opportunities they were provided, for compensatory services. I just don't want to see something down the road that becomes a bigger barrier for that family in that district to reconnect if that child's been disconnected for so long.
Yeah, we had guidance that came out recently from the commissioner's office about attendance. So the State Department isn't reporting attendance right now as they were when children were in the buildings. For example, some students are experiencing anxiety and depression, either whether they had that before or not, and are unable to engage in activities related to their classes. So is the child attending or not? That's very difficult to determine, even for districts that have very elaborate and comprehensive distance learning plans. So in that guidance, it talks about student engagement and the school's responsibility and the district's responsibility to convene teams for students that either they have not received communication from the home or the family, or they've received communication that the student isn't able to engage. So those same structures at the school level, where you would have a nurse and a social worker perhaps, or school psychologist and a teacher and an administrator, brainstorming and problem solving about how to re-engage the students, those processes should still be in place now, as you mentioned, Jane, so that there's not a further divide when school resumes its normal operations, hopefully sooner rather than later. But we don't want parents to take the stance of refusing all services and supports now in the hopes of receiving, additional services and supports later. That's not to say that there's not an assessment of, like you said, a regression of skills or the impact on the student's ability to meet goals and objectives. But if the district is offering services and then working with the parent, if that format or structure or modality or timing doesn't work, and then offers something different to accommodate that, there's a collaborative back and forth and problem solving between school and home for the best results for the child. So the district's making those efforts. That's very different than a parent not hearing from the district at all about anything that they're offering. In that circumstance, the district hasn't provided opportunities. They haven't tried to amend or make the effort to ensure that the students benefiting from receiving instruction at the home. That's a very different conversation once school resumes than the first scenario.
So I think the message to families is, if you are overwhelmed by the instruction, or it's not appropriate for your child and they're not engaging, or your child's experiencing depression and anxiety, whatever the cause for your child not engaging, or you work Monday through Friday and you can't possibly support their learning in the setting that you're getting, families need to tell the districts this. They can't say, I'll wait and tell them when we re-engage. You need to inform the district now that you are having this issue, so it's documented on the record now, and you can also document any conversations you've had anytime if they are trying to work it out with you. But we do have families who say nobody responds to me. So the family needs to make the effort. I'm saying this, I never like to put responsibility on the family if it's not necessary, but I think for families' own protection, they need to be very clear with the district what they're trying, what their barriers are, and what they are able to do, so that people understand this isn't a matter of, I'm just gonna do nothing now and deal with it in the fall. You know, or whenever we come back. That could be a problem for families, but we do also have the families who have heard nothing. And I know that because Keo is on the call, and Keo works with a lot of Spanish-speaking families, and some of the families she's working with have reached out to the district and they have heard nothing. And it may be a language barrier in some cases and maybe not in others, but if they need to call you at the bureau and they're not an English speaker, what would you recommend?
Yeah, Jane, I would recommend that they call our main line at the bureau. We have 2 Spanish-speaking administrative assistants that would be able to assist. Our building is still open, and although most of our staff is working from home or remotely, our phones are working. We're able to receive our phone messages and pick up phone in real time. So if they would call our main number, which is 860-713-6910, we would be able to assist that parent and that family to help navigate the situation. And similar to CPAC, I know, Jane, that you're taking calls and reaching out to families to make sure that they know they can contact CPAC. Similarly, they can contact the Bureau, and we can help parents, assist parents in navigating this situation.
Bryan,
we had a parent that called, oh, sorry, Keo, go ahead.
Can you please repeat the number?
Yes, 860-713-6910. It's the main phone number at the Special Education Bureau. And I was just going to give a circumstance where we had a parent that spoke Portuguese that contacted our office, that moved in from a different state and had some trouble navigating the registration process with the school. So we were able to provide assistance to that parent and help them connect with the district, so that the district was aware of the concerns and that they were able to work out a scenario where that student his needs are now being met.
Good. Claudia had a question she wanted to pose.
Sure.
My question is, how do students and families that go to magnet school navigate from that? Because I'm a teacher at a magnet school. My kids also go to magnet school, and there's a huge disconnect from the school that they go to and the district. So magnet school do not provide food services or some type of communication, but there is no connectivity from where I live, where I reside. And most of those students are going to go back to their district when they finish whatever grade that they're finishing. So how we bridge those 2 districts, you know, the local district that you live in and where your kid attends the magnet schools. Thank you.
Yeah, Claudia, thank you. That's a great question. You know, our choice programs, we've been communicating guidance to from our office. Lisa Lamenzo is the bureau chief that that supports charter schools. I know that you mentioned magnet schools, and I know there's a couple of different types of magnet schools, whether they're run by the district or run by a different district, as you mentioned. And like everything else at this time, communication between the schools and the responsible district are so vitally important right now. I think you mentioned food services and supports for families within the magnet schools. It's, you know, as far as special education is within these scenarios, the magnet school is responsible to implement those IEPs to the greatest extent possible. So those schools and those teachers would have the same responsibility that the sending district has. And so if that's not happening, the district should reach, or the parent should reach out to the school and then reach out to the district, who's ultimately responsible for the IEP and for the PPT meetings. So it certainly they're certainly a very complicated system, is even more complex, I think, in these school choice scenarios that you mentioned. So if the parent has questions or concerns about that, we have support at the State Department of Education where we can have consultants work with that individual family to help navigate the situation.
Thanks, Brian. Sheri also had a question. Sheri, you want to ask?
Sure.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having this with us. I was in a situation where I have a daughter who's a senior, and she's supposed to have a PPT in May to discuss her transition to her post-secondary program.
Yes.
And of course I emailed them, and the comment was, well, we're unable to currently do the evaluations at this point, so they can't give me an answer regarding a PPT. What is the guidance on that right now? My daughter's supposed to be graduating in June, and I feel like her whole world's coming crashing down like everyone else. And where are we going from here, you know?
Yeah, Sheri, thank you for your question. And, you know, just a couple of things that I wanted to mention about PPTs. We want to be sure that everybody is clear that the responsibilities for a PPT have not been alleviated. There has been no waiver. There has been no determination. The Bureau of Special Education does not have the authority to waive the requirements for IEP meetings and PPT meetings to be happening. That would take an act of Congress, literally, to ensure that. Having said that, we know there's practical limitations to the compliance requirements of IEPs. So, you know, our first guidance that came out on March 24th spoke to some of those issues about parents and districts communicating safety, confidentiality, if there's meaningful participation in the meeting, and then what is the purpose of the meeting. In your case, it's your daughter's transition, where you're going to be reviewing and taking some of those final steps to ensure the transition to college, which is a very appropriate and very meaningful reason to be meeting now, even during school closures. In other words, that can't be delayed to the fall, maybe like similar to an annual review. So we have updated guidance to ensure that districts don't have broad sweeping policies that PPT meetings are not being conducted at this time. Again, there still could be reasons why. I think you mentioned an evaluation for your daughter also. So we know that districts and parents don't want to be making decisions with incomplete information at this time. So they should be talking to say, well, in absence of this evaluation or in absence of this information, what can we get accomplished through the PPT meeting process? So we have updated guidance that is ready to be released in the next day or two. We were hoping for guidance, additional guidance from the federal government, but that has not yet come. I mentioned in the opening that there were topic briefs that the Office of Special Education Programs has in their legal department, but just not had a chance to release yet. But I think your concerns are true, as you mentioned, for all high school seniors at this time that are making those transitions. The State Department's working closely with higher ed, to try to assist with some of the issues around grades and transcripts and transition for students from school to post-secondary. I think, we had a question related to yours, Sheri, for a student that required cognitive testing for an IQ score for adult services, which was a requirement of a different adult agency, not necessarily the school. And so there's questions about, in absence of being able to administer those evaluations, we can still move forward with the process of transition to ensure that those students are supported. So I think, to the extent that you can, meeting virtually for the purpose for your daughter for that transition, every effort should be made to do so.
So Bryan, in the interest of time, everyone, there are a few questions pending. I'd like to get to those questions and then we'll wrap up. And they are related to the one that Sheri just asked. So Margot had a question. The guidance is that PPTs can be conducted for unique circumstances, which is in quotes. What does that mean? Her district is saying that it will be for extreme cases like having a child hospitalized in a crisis. And I think, Bryan, you just basically said if there's a true reason to meet, as in Sheri's case, to move things forward, that's part of the guidance, that there's actually a purpose for that meeting.
Yeah, and that really has to be a discussion, an individual determination between the parent and the district. I want to emphasize the fact that when our guidance came out, it was initially in the pandemic stages where schools were closed for 2 weeks or through March 20th. Shortly thereafter, there was the extension to April 20th, and then now the extension to May 20th. As I first start out by saying the IEP and PPT requirements remain in place. So we know there's an impact to that. The circumstances that I mentioned take into account safety, confidentiality, meaningful participation, and then the purpose of the PPT. So those are the 4 questions that should be asked. Parents need to know that they can excuse a PPT member and still hold a PPT. So that's something, we've been getting questions on, that a parent can sign the state form to excuse a PPT member to have that meeting go on. But we want to caution PPT meetings, especially around evaluations and eligibility determinations and present levels of performance, again, from making determinations or making decisions based on incomplete information. So I know that doesn't answer specifically the question, but our updated guidance will indicate the fact that these requirements remain in place. There should be no broad sweeping policies to say that PPTs are postponed until further notice, and that to the extent possible, PPT should happen. And we know this is a different situation for both families and schools, that, if teachers are providing online support and online services and also have the responsibilities for meetings, in a school setting, perhaps that teacher would have a substitute teacher, for example, so that they can attend the meeting. There are no substitute teachers in these circumstances, so there's an impact there as well. That does not mean that PPTs can't and shouldn't happen for the required reasons, but there should be communication between the parent and the district to be able to make those determinations. And parents and districts can come to a mutually agreeable decision to extend timelines. That's really something that we want to emphasize to parents, is that if your district is asking you, and let's say Johnny's annual is due on May 5th, do you want to hold a meeting on May 5th? You can extend that and say, given the current situation, given my situation at home, can we delay that meeting until further notice, or delay that meeting until June or until September? And once that's documented, that agreement between the parent and the district can constitute an extension in some of those required timelines. We talked about ESY earlier. Obviously, those discussions and those decisions have to be made prior to the end of the school year, which is a little different from each school to school, but June 15th or somewhere therein where districts are ending, and then the summer sessions would be starting. So those are circumstances where those meetings would have to happen, sooner rather than later. The example that was given for high school seniors moving on to post-secondary ed or employment, those are scenarios that can't be delayed beyond the extension of time.
Okay, so I have the last two questions. One is, so if a PPT does meet, when is that change, assuming there's a change determined, implemented? When does the actual new IEP go into place?
Yeah, so if so PPTs can meet, and if there is a change to the IEP, the implementation will be the same as it would have been without school closures, if that makes sense. So that's hard to describe, but I'll give you an example. If a student has an annual review that is based on calendar, not based on school year, so written from April 20th to April 20th, 2019 to 2020, the implementation date for that IEP would be 15 days later. So giving the parent time for to review and prior written notice, and then implemented thereafter. For school-based IEPs, what often happens is the current IEP continues until the end of June, and then the new IEP starts on the first day of school the next school year. So in that scenario, that would be the start date. But parents and districts can agree on start dates for the implementation. And if we are still in a remote learning situation or continued ed opportunities, then that new IEP or current IEP would be used to implement to the greatest extent possible for continued ed opportunities.
So Maria, you had a question you wanted to ask Bryan too? You're muted, yep.
Yes, thank you, Jane, for the opportunity. My name is Maria Ramos. I live in Bridgeport. I have a 17 son, senior now. It's very interesting information I received today in this group because it's for transition goal, the most important thing for me. My question, la voy a hacer en español, si Kiomari me puede ayudar a traducir, por favor.
Kio will translate for you, yes.
Kio, ¿me escuchas?
Sí, vamos.
Ok. So, voy a, parte de las barreras que estamos teniendo las familias, y estoy teniendo yo como familia que el primer idioma es español, es primero el idioma, el factor que en mi distrito no todos los niños tienen electrónicos, y el factor de que no todas las familias, no todas las mamás tenemos el nivel académico para poder seguir apoyando a nuestros hijos, pero lo estamos haciendo. ¿Y hasta ahí quieres traducir?
Sí, sí. So what Maria just finished sharing is that part of the barriers is the language that she's facing as a Spanish speaker, also access to technology, not necessarily available for all kids, and also the parents level, academic level, to be able to help support their children who are Spanish speakers.
So, en base a esa información, nuestro supervisor de Distrito de Educación Especial, el señor Robert Arnold, no hemos recibido ningún comunicado de información de algún plan que él tenga. Sí, nuestro superintendente, Mr. Testani, constantemente ha tenido comunicaciones con nosotros, pero no hemos escuchado particularmente de nuestro supervisor de Educación Especial, el señor Robert Arnold, algún comunicado que nos facilite o nos ayude a entender cuál es el plan que tiene nuestro distrito para nuestros niños atípicos. So, mi pregunta para Bryan es si él está colaborando con el distrito de Bridgeport para que podamos nosotros recibir la información, los padres que hablamos español.
So what she's saying is that as a district, she has not heard from Mr. Arnold. The superintendent has reached out to the families, but as far as Mr. Arnold being the director of special ed has not reached out. And she wants to know if you're collaborating with the district so that they can get information out to families on how they will be able to support their children as Spanish speakers.
Gracias por la
First of all,
oportunidad, Jane.
Perdón?
Hi, Maria. Good to see you. Yes, I would say that we are communicating with districts to be in communication with families, and those responsibilities for translation and for ensuring that parents understand the plans remain in place. And we do understand that there are barriers to that right now, or challenges that we weren't facing when school was in session. I think, Maria mentioned technology and just, parents' ability to support their students in the home, given the academics and given, some of the other needs. I know I'm struggling supporting my kids, in their math classes, for example, because I can't help them. They need to work with their peers and work with their teachers to be able to support that academic piece. So, what I would say is, if there are concerns around translation and around connection with the district, and it sounds like Maria's proactively reached out, reach out to your teacher, reach out to your building administrators, reach out to the special education administrators to be able to communicate those needs and issues. And then there's also the support that we can offer at the Bureau of Special Education and that you can at CPAC to help parents navigate some of these scenarios. One of the concerns, Keo and Jane, that we've talked a lot about since the onset of this is the idea of equity, not only from district to district, but school to school and student to student. And we know some districts have pretty comprehensive distance learning plans and technology in place and Wi-Fi access, and others don't have that level of resources that they're working with. So they're providing more services and supports that are based on materials or based on worksheets or based on, hard copies of learning materials. So what we want to ensure, we are concerned about that equity. I know the State Department has been working to address the, equity issues before, during, and after this time, and they seem to be accentuated during this time of school closures. But one thing to keep in mind is that what is offered to all students needs to be offered to students with disabilities and or language needs, EL students, so that they can access that same material. So that's a very important concept to keep in mind and something to report to either your school or, as I mentioned, CPAC or the State Department, so that we can intervene if needed, if there's a disparity in what that student or family is receiving.
So I want to thank everybody for coming. We did not get to everybody's questions. So I have to think about how we can try to get everybody's answers. One person I know, Bryan has guidance coming out again on PPTs with more specificity, and that will answer several questions. And that, Bryan, any idea of timing?
Yeah, we're in the final stages, Jane, of the guidance coming out. I was hoping to have that in place early this week. So, it's always tricky to guesstimate the timeline of disseminating this information, but it is a high priority for us to get this additional guidance out. So I would say at the latest that it would be released next week, but I'm hoping for this week.
Okay, I do have two simple questions that we can get to. One is if parents and districts agreed to extend a timeline, what would be reasonable documentation for that? What would be required? Or, is it just a matter of sharing emails and saving them that say we are in agreement?
Yeah, Jane, that's a great question. And it can be done in a variety of ways. I think it's wise to do that in writing, so that if it's in an email or a note or a letter, between the parent or the district, it can be captured in a summary on an IEP. It could be captured, you know, to say on our summary form that the district and the parent agree to extend, you know, to hold the annual review on such and such a date, and we'll reconvene at that time. So as long as it's in writing, Jane, that's the important piece. Can be an email, it can be in the summary page.
Then the other, what I hope is a quick question is, what is the district's obligation to provide educational records during this period of closure? Yeah. Is FERPA still in play?
Yeah, it is. I guess I would need more specifics around what the, you know, what the request was, for example, but we know, just as an example, that the district's ability to provide or to have access to their records right now is impacted depending on what's happening in their community. They may not have clerical staff in the building to be able to get some of those materials, or they may. You know, I know some clerical staff and some administrative assistants are working in the buildings periodically, keeping social distancing in play. So there may be some natural delays to those requests, and it would be just a matter of reaching out to the district. The district still has the requirement to provide those records when they're requested, but their ability to do that may be impacted now.
Okay, thank you. And thank you so much for coming, Bryan. I hope you'll come back in May, assuming we're still here, at least till May 20th. And if you guys have more questions, please call CPAC or call the Bureau, and we will try to answer them. And join us on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thanks for staying long.
Thanks,
Bye,
Jane.
everybody.
Thanks, Kiamari.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jane.
Have a good one, guys. Thank you.